Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Ross with the San Antonio No Place Left Network, and I am this morning going to be doing just a brief introduction to WIGTake, or what's it going to take. And so just to introduce this concept, I know for me, when I moved to San Antonio, my vision was just to plant a college ministry. I do college ministry here in San Antonio, plant a college ministry at one of the big campuses here, and then that would help to reach the city. But I have to ask the question, though, what's the Father's heart in this? What's God's heart, and what does he desire? And so just to read quickly from a passage that's familiar to many of us, this is Matthew chapter 6. It's the Lord's Prayer. And Jesus, he taught us to pray. He said, starting in verse 9, he said, "Pray then like this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." So from this passage, we clearly see that God longs for us to have his heart. He wants us to pray that his will would be done here on earth as it is in heaven. And we know from Matthew 28, the Great Commission, and other passages, that God desires that this gospel be proclaimed to all people, not just planting a single ministry, but that all people in my city, all people in the nations would be able to hear. And so that's really our heart and our prayer, is that we would also have that heart, the heart of the Father. And so that being the case, I have to ask the question, not how do I plant a single college ministry or how do we plant a single church, but what's it going to take to reach our city? What's it going to take to reach our people group, our target group? And so for us here in San Antonio, and this is the WIGTake here, this is just what's it going to take in order to reach our city. We have to ask the question of how many people are there in our city? And so if you just Google that or you look for it online, you're going to quickly find that there are about 1.5 million people in San Antonio. And now if you do some math on this, and again, how many of those folks are actually believers or not? Well, what we're longing for and what we desire, so, people who study these movements of God, or these even just movements in general, would say that when 10% of a given population is actually has bought into a message and is also helping to make that message known, that everybody in that target group then will be aware of and will know that message. And so what we're looking for really is at a minimum that we'd have 10% of this 1.5 million people who are actively out proclaiming Jesus. They're sharing the gospel. They're, we would say, disciple makers. And so that number, when we do the 10%, gives us 150,000 people that we desire or would long to be walking with Jesus. I've been challenged by this. I'm just going to quickly put a plug in. If you need some reading over Christmas break, 2 books that are out right now that could help. One of them is The Rise and Fall of Movements by Steve Addison. He talks a lot about these movements of the gospel and how these numbers and just the idea of reaching a whole entire target group, how that is taking place throughout history and how that's taking place even in our context and in our generation right now around the world. And then another one that I'm reading right now is called From Megachurch to Multiplication. And they start, and this is a study of a church in Lubbock, Texas, but they start by asking the question of what's it going to take? Not just to reach, to plant one church or to plant a mega church, but what's it going to take to reach all of the lost people in the U.S.? And we know from the statistics by George Bonner and the Pew Research Center that number is rapidly growing and expanding. The largest growing group right now in the U.S. is the nuns, religiously unaffiliated. So that being the case, we start with the question of what's it going to take? And for us in San Antonio, 1.5 million people, 150,000 people who would be proclaiming Jesus. And so, and a target year, that might be helpful for us to think about. I'm just going to throw out some ideas that I've been wrestling with, and then I would love to maybe just have this be a conversation starter for us here in the No Place Left Network in San Antonio. But could we by 2030, so we're coming into the year 2020 right now, but in 10 years, what would it look like to reach our city? What would be the numbers that we would need by 2030? And so in megachurch to multiplication, they're asking that question of how can we do that in 10 years? And so if we think about those numbers of in 10 years, what would that look like to reach 150,000 people who are multiplying disciples? Then that gives us a number to work towards. In the megachurch multiplication book right now, they actually use numbers that say that in the U.S., if you add up all of the church revenue for all the churches in the U.S., and then you divide that by the number of baptisms they had this last year, right now it's costing the U.S. church about $1.5 million per baptism in the U.S. I'm going to say that again a little bit. $1.5 million per baptism in the U.S. is the current cost. And if you do the math on this and think about $1.5 million per baptism, if you're going to try to baptize 150,000 people in San Antonio in 10 years, I did some quick math. It's like, I think $225 billion is what we would need to do that. I don't know about you, but I'm not that great of a fundraiser to be able to do that. So we think, okay, we need a different strategy. And this is where some numbers that I'm wrestling with that I would just throw out for our team to be processing with. One of the things that we're really praying and trusting God with in the network right now across the world is this idea of 1-3-9. And that's the idea that if I am able to help 3 people or, 2 to 3 other people, and then each of those friends are able to start helping 2 to 3 other people, then it begins to multiply. We see multiplication, not addition. And so in my discipleship, that's what I'm going for is, Lord, would you give me 3 faithful friends that I can help to invest my life in who could then invest their life in others. So we do math more like that. And let's just say conservatively, it's just 2 people. So if this next year, I wanted to try to just have 2 people with me. So that at the end of 2020, there were 3 of us who were actively sharing our faith, maybe once a week. It's kind of a goal that I would have for my disciples, if not more. Maybe once a day is kind of my personal goal, but to be able to share our faith actively throughout the community or the context we live in with our oikos, our relational network, how can we start working towards this? So I did some math. I'm just going to put this on the board really quick, and then we're going to end this and just love to encourage you to pray and process of that. But so at the end of 2020, I'm just saying conservatively that I think that there's probably about 20 of us here in San Antonio. It could be more than that. In fact, the numbers from just a recent gender map that we did show that we had over 50 house churches or 50 churches and groups that are out there trying to do movement ministry and make disciples. And so it's probably a lot more than this, but let's just say there's 20 of us here in San Antonio that are actively sharing our faith right now and trying to help others. And we're going to commit to this 1-3-9 strategy. So at the end of 2020, if there's 20 of us right now, then that would be 60 of us. That seems doable. I could see us getting 60 friends on board by the end of 2020 who are willing to make disciples, share their faith, plant churches, and plant new spiritual communities that are multiplying across the city. Then when you do the math on that, and you come on down, in 21, again, it's 180, 22, 500, we're tripling, so we're tripling each year. And so as you come on down here, it's beautiful because as you get to 2020, what you're going to see is that there are 131,220 disciple makers, people who are actively out sharing their faith and helping others hear this message. So we're almost to our goal. In actually just about 7 to 8 years, we actually are almost reaching our goal of reaching the city of San Antonio. You come down and in year 28, we hit 393,660 disciple makers. And so we've hit our goal of trying to saturate the city of San Antonio with the gospel of Jesus. And it goes on from there to where that in year 29, there's 1.18 million people who are actively sharing their faith and making disciples. And then in year 30, it's 3.5 million. We've effectively reached the city of San Antonio in 10 years. Asking, what's the Father's heart? What's it going to take? I think these are the kind of things that we need to be thinking about and committing to here in the city of San Antonio if we want to reach this city and reach this generation. And so I just encourage you as we head into the holidays. I always love at the end of the year to reflect and think about what God has done and celebrate over the last year, but also to think about the year coming ahead. And I'd encourage us, what about the next 10 years? What could God do? What could God do? But also, what's it going to take if God's going to reach our city? And ultimately, the end isn't just San Antonio. We want to be sending these friends out. We want to be multiplying disciples all over the nations so that the whole world has a chance to hear about Jesus. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude this video, but invite you to bring your discussion, prayers, and we look forward to the next time we gather here at Saba, maybe talking a little bit more about specific ways that we're moving towards this goal as a team. So thanks for tuning in, friends.